In this world, healers have been recognized for their exceptional abilities and are often given positions of power as a result. There is even a royal academy dedicated to training the nation's best healers. As a healer, you are usually going to be classed as first, second, or third rate. But then we have Xenos, who doesn't even have a license to use healing magic. However, that hasn't stopped him from helping people whenever he can. So he opened a small office on the edge of the kingdom so he can treat the people who need his help. Once he is done healing the man who came to his office, the man thanks him, but he doesn't have much to pay Xenos with, so he offers him all the money in his pocket. Xenos is fine with it because he's not doing this for personal profit, and after the man leaves, his assistant, Lily, comes in to remind him that he got a house call. Xenos says he's going to head out immediately, so Lily tells him she will have dinner waiting when he gets back. A few hours later, Xenos is done with his house call and is on his way back home, but while he's walking down the street, he notices a wolf girl who looks like she's in terrible pain. Just then, a noble catches up with the girl and starts yelling at her. He asks where she has been, so the girl tries to explain that her stomach was hurting really badly, so she tried going to the hospital, but they wouldn't treat her because she didn't have any money. The noble looks at her like she's stupid, and a stomach ache isn't enough to warrant a trip to the hospital, especially not for a slave like her with no health insurance. He then drags her off and says she should get back to work immediately. The noble takes the girl to a cemetery and throws her to the ground, causing her to smash her head on a tombstone. He really must not care about her health because an injury like that is enough to kill a person. Plus, after the girl rolls over on the ground in pain, some scary black energy went into her, so I'd be very concerned. However, the noble has the observational skills of a blind man, so he thinks the girl is faking it and tells her to get back on her feet immediately. She obviously can't do that because of the severe pain. The noble walks over to her body and threatens to put her in one of these graves if she doesn't listen to him. But she can barely move, so he proceeds to kick her across the floor. The noble is sick of waiting around for her, so he says she should hurry up and start looking around the cemetery for anything of value. He then starts walking away, and maybe it's the severe pain or the fact that she got possessed, but the girl snaps and slashes the noble across the stomach. The noble is in disbelief at first because he has never been injured so badly before. He tries reasoning with the wolf girl, but then he remembers how he was kicking her a second ago, and she looks like she's out for blood, so there's no point in trying to negotiate. He starts running away at the speed of a light jog because that's as fast as he can go, and the noble definitely would have died here. But by some miracle, Xenos happened to be in the area, so he runs to him for help. He tells Xenos that his slave went crazy and is trying to kill him, but Xenos saw the way he treated her back on that street, so he is pretty sure that the noble deserved it. The wolf girl eventually catches up with the noble, so he begs Xenos to save him. Xenos takes one look at her, and he can clearly see the dark energy around her, so he asks the noble what he was doing when the girl went out of control. The noble doesn't want to admit that he was trying to get her to rob some graves for him, so he just says he was farming for loot. That's definitely illegal, but he tries to change the topic and reminds Xenos that he is severely injured, so he needs to get to a hospital right away. He even offers to pay Xenos if he can save him from the girl, but Xenos doesn't care about money. However, he also took an oath to save people's lives, so when the girl charges at the noble, Xenos pulls him out of the way in time. The girl then throws a bunch of rocks at Xenos, so he skillfully evades them without much effort. If he is skilled enough to do that, the noble thinks he should be able to kill the girl, but Xenos firmly refuses because he has a strict no-kill rule. The noble tells him to stop spouting that Dark Knight nonsense, because if Xenos doesn't kill that girl right now, then she might end up killing the noble. But Xenos still refuses because as a healer, his goal is to save as many people as possible. And immediately after saying this, he proceeds to punch straight through a rock that the girl threw at him. And I'm pretty sure healers can't normally do that. Xenos can tell that the girl is incredibly fast. In fact, she's way faster than a demi-human should be, so he knows something is wrong. He doesn't want to hurt her too badly, so as the girl tries to slash him, he pulls up a shield, and as soon as she makes contact, she gets flung backwards into a nearby building. Incidentally, this also causes a piece of the building to collapse right next to the noble, and Xenos is fast, so he totally could have saved the noble, but he simply chose not to. Now that everything has calmed down, Xenos walks over to the girl's body, and her leg is broken from the fall, so she is struggling to get away. She is still feral, so Xenos lets her bite onto his arm to keep her in one place. He has figured out that she is possessed, so he puts his hand on her head and starts healing her to get the spirit out. He is successful, but he is still a little curious as to what she could possibly have been doing to make a spirit possess her. In any case, he still needs to take care of the ghosts, so he uses his powers to exorcise it. He then turns back to the girl, and now that she's back to normal, he heals her broken leg so she can walk again. The noble sees this as he pulls himself out from under the rubble, and he is amazed that Xenos is powerful enough to heal a broken leg instantly. He is still badly hurt, so he pleads with Xenos to save him, But Zeno says he actually just clocked out for the day, so the noble will have to wait until tomorrow to get healed. The noble knows he's going to bleed out in a couple of hours, so he begs Zenos to heal him right now. Zenos eventually agrees, but he says it's going to cost him extra. The noble doesn't care about the price, so he gives Zenos all the money he has. This is well above the current market rate for healing, so he assures Zenos should be satisfied, but to his surprise, Zenos says this is nowhere near enough. He doesn't usually care about payment, but considering how scummy the noble was acting earlier, Zenos is feeling very capitalistic right now. The noble threatens to report Zenos for extortion, but that wouldn't bother him since he doesn't have a license in the first place. He's technically an illegal healer, but the noble probably knows all about illegal stuff considering the fact that he has been grave robbing. Anyway, Zenos is willing to make a deal, so he tells the noble that he is willing to accept alternative payment, so in addition to the gold, he wants to take the noble's slave. The noble never cared about the girl anyway, so he agrees to Zenos' terms, and as soon as Zenos heals him, he hands over the girl's slave contract. The noble then walks off in a fit of rage, so Zenos sits on the floor next to the girl and waits for her to wake up. When she finally regains consciousness, she is surprised to see a man sitting next to her, and asks him who he is. Zenos tells her his name and explains that he just bought her, so from now on she's his slave. With that out of the way, he tells Till to take off her clothes immediately. Till gets flustered and asks him if he's serious, but Zenos isn't joking. He says he paid a lot for Till, so he needs to make sure his property is in good condition. Till eventually does as he says since she can't disobey her master, and once Zenos gets a good look at her body, he can immediately tell what's wrong. He noticed that she was in pain earlier, and that's because she has a gallstone blocking her bile duct. It should be easy enough for him to fix, so he reaches for her stomach and uses magic to perform the operation. In an instant, the gallstone is removed and Till no longer feels any pain, so she asks Zenos what he did. Zenos explains that all he did was open up her stomach, extract the gallstone, and close her back up in a fraction of a second. A totally normal procedure. Zenos doesn't think there's anything special about it, but Till knows for a fact that no other healer could do something like that. She thanks Zenos for healing her, but he tells her a thank you isn't enough. He invested a lot into her, so he's going to need Till to work to pay him back. At first, Till thinks Zenos is going to ask her to service him with her body, but Zenos just wants her to give him directions to a particular plant he has been looking for. Till thinks that's a strange request, but she leads him to a bush with the leaves that he is looking for. She asks him if this is really all he wants from her because she is willing to do a lot more for him, but Zenos says this is enough. He always demands a fair price for the work he does for others, and her helping him find these leaves is all he needed from her, so all debts have been settled. He then tears up Till's slave contract and tells her she can do whatever she wants with her life now. Till doesn't really know what to do with herself now that she's not a slave anymore, but she's free to try all sorts of new things now, and it's all thanks to Zenos. She asks if she can come see him again, and Zenos says that if she's ever hurt, he will be glad to heal her, but not for free of course. Meanwhile, back at home, while Zenos was out working, Lily began preparing dinner. The food smelled so good that the resident ghost, Camilla, had to come down to see what was cooking. Lily notices her, and Camilla says she's excited to taste Lily's cooking, but the food won't be ready for a while, so she's going to have to wait in her room. Just then, a girl named Zofia came in looking for Zenos, but Lily tells her that he's out on a house call, so he's not here right now. Zofia was hoping to get Zenos all to herself by coming early today, but since he's not here, she decides to wait until he gets back. It looks like Zofia wasn't the only one who wanted to see Zenos today, because a few moments later, Linga shows up looking for him as well. Lily informs her that Zenos isn't here, so Linga says she'll wait, but she's surprised to see that Zofia is already here. She was hoping to lick Zenos all over while he inspected her body, but now that plan is ruined. A few moments later, an orc girl named Lou bursts through the door, so Lily goes to meet her and says she can join them inside, but only after she fixes the front door she broke. Lou likes Zenos too, but she actually came because she could smell Lily's cooking a mile away, and she really wanted to try it. Eventually, Lily is done cooking, so she was off to finish a couple of her chores and leaves the others in the kitchen. The second that Lily leaves the kitchen, the demi-human girls can no longer resist the smell of Lily's food, so they all go to give it a taste test. But they're definitely smart enough to know not to empty out the entire pot. Never mind, that pot looks pretty empty now. The three are starting to realize how badly they've messed up because Lily is definitely going to be mad once she gets back. A few moments later, Lily returns, and after seeing what has happened, she smiles at the girls and demands that they explain themselves. Later that night, Zenos finally returns home and Lily apologizes because dinner isn't ready like she had promised. There was a bit of a problem with the food, but she already found the solution. She sent the girls out to gather ingredients for her to make a new dish, and by the time they return, they brought way more ingredients than she expected, so Lily will be able to make a feast night. But before that, she knows Xenos must have been working hard all day, so she says she'll prepare a cup of tea for him so he can relax. Xenos was once part of a world-class adventurer party, but one day the party leader, Aston, throws a gold coin at him to remind him that he is poor and says he is kicking Xenos out of the party. He tells Xenos he is a worthless waste of space and the party is better off without him, but Xenos knows for a fact that he is the only thing keeping this party together. However, Aston refuses to believe that. He only recruited Xenos to use him as a human shield since no one would care if he got killed in battle. But now that their party has become strong, Xenos tries to tell him that the only reason they are strong is because he is there to heal them every time Aston does something stupid. But Aston tells him his shady, self-taught healing skills are worthless, and any other healer could do a better job than him. Meanwhile, out in an alley, two slave traders are trying to hold an elf girl down so they can tie her up to be sold later. The woman warns her partner to be careful not to hurt Lily since elves are really rare, and they can get more money if she's in good condition. The man already has her pinned to the ground, but Lily refuses to go down without a fight, so she kicks him in the balls, and while he is wincing in pain, she starts running away. She probably could have escaped too, but unfortunately, the man had a bow, so he shoots her in the ankle. Lily falls to the ground, and she can't run away anymore, so the man catches up to her. He tries to hold her down again, but Lily bites his hand with the force of 1,000 chihuahuas, so the man has to stab her to get free. Xenos happen to be walking through that alley, and he finds Lily on the floor, bleeding out, and asks the two if they are the ones who did this to her. They tell him to frick off because slavery is perfectly legal in this country and they own Lily, so they can do what they want with her. Xenos knows they are right, so he legally can't do anything to help Lily. But then he comes up with an idea and tells them he wants to buy Lily. He offers them the gold coins he got from Aston, and normally they refuse since elf slaves are worth way more than one gold coin, but since she's already bleeding out on the floor, they decide to take the money and leave. Once they are gone, Xenos walks over to Lily to see if she's still alive. Lily has already accepted her fate and is telling Xenos to just leave her here, but he tells her she's not going to die. Lily looks down at her wound, and she is surprised to see that Xenos has already healed her completely. She thanks him for his help and apologizes for the gold coins he spent to buy her, but Xenos didn't really want to keep it anyway since it reminded him of Aston. He asks Lily if she has a home to go to, but with her being a slave and all, it's pretty safe to assume that she's broke and homeless. She's also very hungry, so Xenos offers to get her some food and clothes before they do anything else. Xenos ends up taking her to a diner nearby and buys her a new set of clothes along the way. Lily is happily eating the food Xenos bought for her, but she's a little confused since he didn't buy any food for himself. Xenos tells her he isn't hungry, but in reality, he's just really broke. He spent the last of his money on clothes and food for Lily, and since he got kicked out from Golden Phoenix, he's probably going to have to get a new job soon, so he doesn't starve. Just then, a man stumbles into the diner and it looks like his arm is hurt. He got into some trouble, and he managed to make it out alive, but he's definitely not okay. Xenos takes a look at him from across the room and from the hole in his arm and the mild burn marks. He deduces that the man must have been shot by a magic gun. It's not that big of a deal since the guy is a lizard person, so the wound should be able to naturally heal within a few days. But then again, the wound is pretty deep, so it'd be better to take care of it right now. Xenos stretches his hand out to cast heal on the man, and within a few seconds, the hole in his arm seals back up. The man is surprised that his arm is suddenly back to normal, so he asks Xenos who he is, and before he can even respond, Lily declares that Xenos is a legendary healer. The man has never heard of him before, but he is really grateful for Xenos' help, so he hands him a couple of coins and promises to spread the word about him. Xenos was a little confused as to why the guy gave him money at first, but then he realized that healers usually get paid for healing people. That gives him an idea, so he decides to open a clinic and become a professional healer, but since he's from the slums, it'll be hard for him to get an official healing license. Plus, running a legit business would mean he has to pay taxes, and in the words of Virgil, tax evasion isn't a crime, it's an obligation. That's why Xenos is going to become an underground healer. Lily doesn't really understand what he's talking about, but if Xenos is going to open a clinic, then she wants to help him. Xenos thinks about it for a second, and since opening a clinic without a license would be illegal, he's not sure if it's right to drag an innocent kid into this. But Lily reminds him that he purchased her a few minutes ago, and that makes him her master, so it is her duty to follow him no matter how many laws he breaks. Xenos didn't really intend to become her master though, he just wanted to help her out. Lily then points out that she has nowhere to go, so if he doesn't take her with him, then it'll be his fault if she ends up as a slave again. Xenos eventually relents and agrees to let Lily come with him, so she swears that she will serve Xenos with every inch of her body, but he asks her to please not make this weird. Anyway, if Xenos is going to open a clinic, He's going to need to solve his current homelessness issue, so he takes Lily to an abandoned section of the city to look for a place to stay. Lily asks Xenos why he wants to live here, so he explains that he needs to stay hidden, so the Royal Association doesn't find out about his illegal clinic. Plus, with how spooky this place is, the property values are the perfect price for his empty wallet. Free. Lily can't deny that, but she is still worried because she knows that scary monsters tend to live in places like this. The two of them eventually find a house that is still perfectly intact, so Xenos thinks he just hit the jackpot, but as soon as Lily sees the place, she is terrified because this looks like a textbook haunted house. If they get unlucky, they might even run into a wraith. Xenos has no idea what a wraith is, so Lily explains that wraiths are terrifying undead monsters who can turn people into ghosts with a single touch. They head inside, but it's pretty dark, so Lily offers to use her magic to provide some light. Xenos is surprised that Lily can use magic, but she can only use basic spells, so she doesn't think it's very impressive. With the room lit up, they can now see everything clearly, and it's just as bad as Lily thought it would be, but Xenos is still pretty optimistic. This place still has a good roof, and the support pillars are sturdy, so it's perfect for their clinic. However, they run into one major problem. There's actually a wraith here, and she says she's going to suck Xenos dry of his life force. Lily is freaking out, but Xenos is just disappointed that the house was already occupied. Carmilla charges at Xenos, but he easily knocks her back with a heal spell and destroys both of her arms. He isn't intimidated by Carmilla at all because back when he was in Golden Phoenix, Aston would often send him into the labyrinth alone whenever he was in a bad mood, and Xenos would constantly run into wraiths down there, so he has defeated at least 100 of them. It turns out that healing magic is pretty effective against undead monsters. Back on topic, he apologizes to Carmilla for barging into her home like this, but there aren't any other options around here, so he asks if she's okay with him moving in. Carmilla feels insulted that Xenos would even suggest moving in with her, the Queen of Wraiths, so she summons a ton of her ghost servants to get rid of him. However, Xenos casually uses a high heal spell to wipe all of them out. Carmilla is stunned by the power Xenos possesses, and she's starting to worry that he might exorcise her, but he really doesn't want to fight Carmilla. He knows it's rude just moving like this, but he really needs a place to stay, so he asks her if she's willing to give him and Lily at least one bedroom and a place for them to treat future patients. Carmilla knows she can't beat Xenos, so she tells him he can have the first floor, but she's keeping the second floor for herself. Xenos thinks that worked out pretty well, but Lily doesn't know if she should be more scared of Carmilla or Xenos. By the next morning, Lily is really bored since there aren't any patients around, so she asks Xenos if she should go outside to do a little advertising. But Xenos doesn't think that's a good idea since the Royal Hospital might find out about this place. Besides, it shouldn't take too long for them to get their first customer, and sure enough, a few minutes later someone walks in. Lily stands up to go greet their first customer, and she's surprised to see that it's the guy Xenos healed yesterday. Xenos had been expecting him to show up sooner or later since law-abiding citizens don't end up getting shot by magic bullets. And guys like him probably don't want to go to normal hospitals for obvious reasons. The man introduces himself as Zond and says he needs Xenos to take a look at his sister. Xenos says he will do what he can, so Sophia shows him her minor flesh wound. Sophia says her arm has been acting funny since yesterday, and after taking one look at the wound, Xenos deduces that Sophia was shot by some sort of magic with a poison attribute. Sophia asks him if there is anything he can do about it, but since Sophia spent all night with it like that, all her arm tissue is pretty much dead. He tells her it is better to just chop the whole arm off to avoid spreading the poison. Sophia is disappointed to hear that she has to lose an arm, but it is what it is, so she asks Xenos how much it will cost for Xenos to amputate it. He tells her she'll have to pay 1 million yen, and as soon as he says that, Zond is enraged because that's an outrageous price for a simple amputation. He's ready to throw hands over this, but Sophia tells him to calm down and starts trying to negotiate with Xenos. She asks him if he really wants to give her such a high price when she's Sophia the Tornado. Sophia is the leader of one of the 3 gangs that run this area, and Xenos is well aware of who she is, but he refuses to do work for free, especially because regeneration is so tiring. Sophia is confused since she has never heard of a healer who could regenerate limbs, and Xenos is confused as well since he didn't know other healers couldn't regenerate limbs. He trained himself to be a healer, so he doesn't know what counts as normal. But that doesn't matter right now, so he asks Sophia if she wants to go through with the procedure. Sophia agrees, so Xenos sets her down on a table and gets ready to amputate the arm. He creates a magic scalpel to do it, but Sophia is a little concerned since she has never seen anything like it before. Xenos explains that it's just a blade of condensed magic that he can conjure at will. It is super sharp and completely sterile, so it's perfect for performing surgeries, but again, most healers can't do that. Xenos begins the operation and uses a constant flow of healing magic to numb the area. He then chops off the infected arm and gets ready to regenerate a new one. He raises the output of his healing magic and begins reforming Zofia's arm, layer by layer, until it's as good as new. Zofia is amazed and grateful that Xenos really regenerated her arm, so she has no complaints about his price anymore. She also says she'll start sending her injured subordinates to Xenos if he's okay with it. And as long as they are paying customers, Xenos doesn't mind. Over the next few days, Xenos has been getting a lot of patience from the Lizardman faction, so Lily makes some tea for him to relax. Xenos thanks her for being so considerate, but he wonders why she made 3 cups instead of 2. Lily says she made one for Carmilla to drink, but Xenos isn't sure she'll want to join them down here. However, Carmilla apparently really likes tea. While they are taking a break, Lily asks Xenos if he knows why the Lizardmen are always getting injured so badly. And from the people he has seen so far, he believes there's a turf war going on between the different factions. And speaking of factions, it looks like one of them just broke down the door. A group of werewolves barge into the clinic, and their leader, Linga, declares that she is going to kill Xenos. She has been fighting the Lizardmen for days now, but no matter how many of them she injures, they always keep getting better, so she's going to take out their healer. First of all, Xenos doesn't work for the Lizardman faction, and he would like to avoid violence here. But Linga has already ordered her men to kill Xenos. However, with his defensive magic, nothing they do can even move him, much less deal damage. Linga realizes she can't beat Xenos, so instead, she resorts to destroying the clinic to get rid of him. But that was a dumb idea because this is still Carmilla's house too, so she won't stand for someone destroying it. As soon as Linga and the other werewolves see Carmilla, they are terrified because a wraith is a deadly monster that they could never hope to defeat. Carmilla fully intends to drain them of their life force for what they did, but Xenos asks her to calm down because he doesn't want anyone to die in his clinic. And as long as Linga and her men are willing to fix the damage they caused, he will forgive them. Things were going well for Xenos after he got Linga and the werewolves under control, but one day an orc comes in and says that his boss wants to meet him. Xenos expected this to happen sooner or later since he has already had to deal with 2 of the bosses of the slums. Leah was the boss of the orcs and ogres, and she has made a fortune from excavating magic stones with her brute strength, so she's a big deal around here. On the bright side, after dealing with her, he won't have to worry about anyone messing with his shop anymore, so he decides to just get it over with. But before he leaves, he asks the orc if Lu is the kind of person who could be reasoned with. The orc responds and tells Xenos that she is the most wise and dignified person he will ever meet. Xenos is glad to hear that, but he is curious as to why the orc didn't bring Lu here with him, so the orc explains that she currently can't move. That sounds pretty bad, so Xenos wastes no time and rushes out to see his new patient. The orc leads into a cave and introduces Xenos to Lu. She is glad to finally meet him, but before he does anything, Xenos asks her how she found out about him. Lu explains that the Lizardmen and werewolves have been ranting and raving about the super-secret healer that they aren't supposed to tell anyone about. That kind of defeats the whole point of being an underground healer, but Xenos will have to deal with that later. According to what Lu heard, Xenos will heal any injury as long as he's paid a fair price, so she wants to see how good he really is. Xenos walks up to her and raises his hand, so Lu asks him what he's doing. Xenos explains that he can't see any external injuries on her body, so he is scanning her to see if there's anything wrong with her insides. Lu is surprised to hear that since most healers can't do that, but Xenos thinks it should be standard practice because how would you treat a patient if you can't check for internal injuries? Anyway, once Xenos' scan is done, he identifies a lump in Lu's abdomen, and because there is mana emanating from it, he believes is a mana stone. Lu tells him he is correct, and this particular mana stone is enchanted with explosion magic, so if she moves from this spot, she might blow up. Xenos asks if someone tried to assassinate her by slipping it into her food, but Lu tells him nothing like that happened. She was just really hungry and mistook the stone for a rice ball, so she ate it. Anyone could have made the same mistake. Okay, maybe not, but Xenos doesn't think there's any reason to worry because sooner or later a mana stone will just come out the other end. He gets ready to leave, but Lu tells him it's not that simple. When she ate the stone, she partially chewed it up, so there isn't much time left before it detonates. She has already accepted that she will die because of her mistake, but her only concern is the fact that her men refuse to leave her side. Xenos asks her what she expects him to do, so she explains that she just wanted him to come here so she can donate all her wealth to him. Once she blows up, it will mean the end of the orc empire she built, so she would rather give all her money to someone who will put it to good use than let it fall into the wrong hands. While she was researching Xenos, she found out that while he demands high prices for his healing, he has a rule about treating children for free, so he must be a good person. She throws a key over to him and explains that he can use it to access her treasure vault once she is dead. But Xenos never said he was going to let her die. The fact that she hasn't blown up yet means she must have eaten the mana stone relatively recently, so Xenos summons his scalpel and walks right up to her. Without saying a word, he starts cutting into Lu's stomach, and at first her men try to stop him, but then Xenos holds up the explosive magic stone. In those few seconds, he managed to cut Lu open, retrieve the stone, and heal the incision, so she doesn't have to worry about blowing up anymore. But the Mama Stone is still highly volatile, so for everyone's safety, Xenos puts it in his hands and squeezes until it blows up. That explosion would have been enough to destroy a whole city block, but Xenos protected his hands with defensive magic, so he's perfectly fine, although it still really hurt. He then hands the key back over to Lu and tells her she doesn't need to worry about donating her fortune anymore. She is still having a hard time believing that Xenos really chose to save her instead of just taking her money, but he says he only requires a fair price for his healing, and an entire fortune would have been too much. Lu has decided that she really likes Xenos now, so she tells him that if he ever needs help, all he needs to do is say the word and she will do everything in her power to assist him. She even offers to have her men provide security for his clinic, but Xenos would rather keep his distance because having Lu's men around is bound to cause problems. A few days go by and Lily is sulking by the front desk because Zofia, Linga, and Lu have been visiting the clinic a lot more recently. Now that Xenos thinks about it, he has been seeing them a lot lately, and they never seem to be injured, so he's starting to wonder why they bother coming in the first place. He assumes they are just bored, but Carmilla tells him those women are clearly in love. Xenos doesn't understand why they would be in love with him since he's just a regular underground healer, but Carmilla knows what she's talking about. Lily is a little worried that one of them might end up dating Xenos and take all his attention, but Xenos says he would never date any of them because, no offense, but they're a bunch of weirdos. Even so, Carmilla thinks it's only a matter of time before those three wage war on each other to decide who gets to have Xenos. Xenos doesn't think things will ever get that bad, but literally the next day, Zofia comes in with a basket of fruit for Xenos and says she is thinking about waging war on the other factions for an unspecified reason. Linga and Lu do the exact same thing, and no matter how much Xenos protests, they refuse to listen to him. Carmilla finds the whole thing funny and jokes that so many people are going to die because of Xenos' womanizing ways, but he doesn't appreciate the way she's phrasing it. The death battle is set to start by noon today, but he can't just let them kill themselves over him, so he has to do something. Meanwhile, the three have already gathered in the stadium with all their men, and they are about to begin the bloodbath when all of a sudden, Xenos shows up. They all turn to him to see what he's going to say, but he tells them he's not here to stop the fight. He knows they have long-standing grudges against each other, so he's going to let them duke it out with one another until they are satisfied. Since Xenos has given them approval for the battle, all the girls agree to fight with everything they've got, and whoever survives will get to claim Xenos' virginity. Xenos doesn't remember agreeing to that last part, but before he can say anything, the fight has already begun. Zofia makes the first move and tries to cut Linga's head off with her daggers, but Linga manages to dodge in time and backflips away. Meanwhile, Lu jumps in and tries to dropkick Zofia, but Zofia moves out of the way, so a bunch of background characters get hit instead. Zofia and Linga clash again, but before they can land a hit on each other, Lu comes in from the top rope and nearly smashes both of them. Zofia gets pushed into the orc corner of the stadium, so she starts attacking the orcs, and the others start doing the same with the members of the opposing factions. It's a gruesome sight with people getting cut up left and right, but to everyone's shock, even after fighting for 6 hours, not a single person has died yet. Just then, Zofia notices that the wounds on her arms are healing on their own, and Xenos tells them that he's the one behind it. He agreed to let them have their little death battle, but he never agreed to let any of them die, because after all, they are still his patients. Zofia feels kind of stupid for not realizing what Xenos was doing until now, but none of them knew it was possible for a healer to heal so many people at once, let alone do it constantly for over 6 hours. They realize that at this rate, the fight is never going to end, and that's the exact point Xenos was trying to make. Unless they can come to terms with one another, they will never be able to live in peace. But if they feel the need to continue fighting, then he will be right here to heal all of them. And just to be clear, he's going to be charging them for his time. The girls now realize how stupid it was to start a war over nothing, so they all agree to get along with each other going forward. However, they're still going to keep fighting over Xenos. They just promise to keep it non-violent. Meanwhile, Lily asks Xenos why he went through all the trouble to do this, so he recalls something that his teacher once told him. A healer is third-rate if they can only heal injuries, second-rate if they can heal the whole body, and first-rate if they can make the world a better place. So while Xenos doesn't think he has what it takes to be a first-rate healer, he still wants to try to make these slums a better place. And besides, if he let all of them die here, he wouldn't have any more patients to treat at his clinic. At least that's what Xenos says, but Lily knows he is just saying that to hide how much he really cares. if the different demi-human factions start getting along and they won't fight anymore, and that would mean Xenos won't get as many patients as before. Yet he still chose to help them anyway. That's part of the reason she likes him so much, and she says this to him directly, but Xenos doesn't really understand what she means. Anyway, it's getting late, so he plans to go collect his payment and head home for the day. Lily is surprised because she thought he was joking when he said he would charge them for the healing he did during the fight, but Xenos was dead serious. Healing that many people is really exhausting, so of course he wants to get paid for it. Meanwhile, over in the capital, the commander of the Royal Knights is meeting with the vice commander, Krishna. She asks the commander if something happened, and he explains that he heard a rumor that says the war between the demi-humans suddenly ended. Krishna is surprised to hear that since the demi-humans have been at war over the slum territory for years, so she finds it hard to believe they suddenly decided to get along. The commander doesn't really believe it either, but if it really is true, then he needs to do something about it. This kingdom has existed with royals and nobility sitting at the top for centuries, and it has stayed that way because all the poor people who are treated unfairly are usually too busy fighting amongst themselves to be a significant threat. However, if they are at peace, then they could form a united front, and then they might start demanding things like universal healthcare, and nobody wants that, right? The rumors say that an individual mediated between the demi-humans to get them to stop fighting, so the commander is putting Krishna in charge of dealing with him. Krishna understands, so she promises to find this individual and arrest him for the heinous crime of bringing peace. Meanwhile, over in Xenos' clinic, he sneezes because people are talking about him, and as soon as this happens, everyone gets worried that he might have a cold. Linga offers to let him use her tail as a blanket, and Lou offers to let him warm his face up between her thick thighs. Xenos tells them it was just a regular sneeze, and he still needs to heal Zofia, so they should quiet down until he is done. Xenos heals Zofia's arm, and she thanks him for his help, but it has been a while since Xenos had to heal her, so he asks how she got hurt. Zofia explains that she was injured while she was working last night. She steals from the corrupt aristocrats and redistributes it to the poor. But when she was sneaking into an aristocrat's house yesterday, she got attacked by the vice commander of the Royal Knights. She's a crazy woman named Krishna, and she'll blast you with magic fire guns on sight if she catches you. Carmilla gets the feeling that getting Krishna's attention would mean a lot of trouble for Xenos, but Xenos doesn't think he needs to worry about it since there's no way a high and mighty vice commander would care about a random underground healer like him. Meanwhile, Krishna is in the slums looking for information about Xenos. She sees all the demi-humans getting along, so she walks up to a lizard man and asks him to tell her who is responsible for ending the war between the demi-humans. The lizard man doesn't know who Krishna is, and he knows that Xenos is trying to keep a low profile, so he says he can't tell her anything. He tries to walk away, but then Krishna pulls out her gun and she says she'll shoot him if he doesn't answer her questions. However, the lizard man is willing to get shot for Xenos' sake, so he tells her to do it already. Just then, Zofia and her brother happen to be passing by, and Krishna isn't prepared to deal with them right now, so she decides to run away. She ends up getting lost in the abandoned part of the city, and by pure chance, she comes across Xenos' clinic, so she steps inside to ask for directions. Xenos is willing to show her how to get back to the main city, but then Lily comes out with some tea, and as soon as Krishna sees Lily's elf ears, she blasts Xenos in the head with her gun. Lily can't believe Krishna would shoot Xenos in the head out of nowhere like that, but Krishna says she has a perfectly justified reason. In addition to her current mission, she was tasked with investigating a string of recent kidnappings in the area. And since Xenos is a human while Lily is an elf, Krishna immediately assumed that Xenos must have kidnapped Lily and responded by shooting him in the head. There are so many problems with Krishna's logic here. So Lily explains that Xenos basically adopted her, and she is here of her own free will. Krishna realizes that she might have jumped to conclusions, and now that she thinks about it, it would be odd for a kidnapping victim to be as happy as Lily. On the bright side, the bullets she used were non-lethal, so she's pretty sure she didn't kill Xenos, but she thinks he might have been knocked unconscious from the blast. However, to her surprise, Xenos seems to be perfectly fine. She apologizes for jumping to conclusions and shooting him like that, but she is curious as to how he managed to survive it unharmed. He tells her he just used some defensive magic to block the bullet before it hit him, but Krishna doesn't believe it because no ordinary defensive magic should be able to stop her bullets. As far as Xenos knows, his defense magic should be totally ordinary, so he has no idea what she's talking about, but over her years as the vice commander of the Royal Knights, she has seen a lot of defensive magic, and she knows Xenos' shields are on par with a Grand Sorcerer. Once Krishna mentions that she is the vice commander of the Royal Knights, Xenos and Lily are put on edge because they realize her being here might spell trouble for them, and Krishna apparently has something that she wants to ask Xenos for help with. To avoid another confrontation, Xenos agrees to talk to her, But he also sends out a warning to all of its clients to make sure none of them show up while Krishna is around. They all sit down and Krishna tells Xenos that she's currently on a secret mission here and she would like his assistance. Xenos says he doesn't want to get involved, but Krishna insists that it is the duty of all citizens to cooperate with the orders of knights. With how much of a loose cannon Krishna is, Xenos is worried she might shoot him again if he refuses to help, so he decides to play along. She informs him that her mission is to find a particular man and arrest him on sight. She doesn't have a name or description, but this mediator is the one who ended the war between the different factions. Xenos spits up his tea once he realizes that the person Krishna is trying to arrest is him, but he plays it cool and asks her why she is hunting the mediator down. Krishna explains that the knight's orders simply cannot ignore someone with the power to bring peace between the factions, but when she tried violently interrogating one of the locals, he refused to tell her anything despite her threats. In Krishna's mind, if the people of the slums aren't willing to sell out the mediator, then that must mean he's an evil mastermind who must be stopped. Xenos tries to explain to her that it's possible that this mediator is trying to avoid a spotlight, so if she just leaves and gives up on searching for him, he probably won't cause any trouble. Krishna asks Xenos if he happens to know who the mediator is, so he makes up an excuse and says he is just speaking from instinct. In any case, Krishna can't simply ignore the mediator because she was given a direct order from her commander, and anyone with the power to stop the war between factions is too much of a threat to leave unchecked. Lily speaks up and says Krishna doesn't have to worry about the mediator destabilizing the nation because he is only interested in making money from honest work. But from the way Lily is talking about the mediator, it seems like she knows him personally. Lily panics and starts telling Krishna that she doesn't know the mediator either, and Krishna is starting to get suspicious, but she lets it go for now. It's getting late, so Xenos tries to use that as an excuse to get Krishna to leave, but while he is pushing her out, she notices the bed in the corner. She finds it odd that Xenos would put a bed down here, and Xenos doesn't want to explain that he and Lily share it because there's a wraith upstairs, so he tells her it's just a spare bed. As soon as Krishna hears this, she asks Xenos if he would be willing to let her use it. She has been having trouble finding a base of operations within the slums, so she would appreciate it if Xenos let her stay here until her mission is over. And of course, she's willing to pay for the accommodations. Xenos can't really refuse without making Krishna suspicious, so he ends up agreeing, and Carmilla finds the whole thing hilarious. Lily makes a little green tea for their new guest, but Krishna can't handle hot drinks, so she starts blowing on it. Lily is still jealous that there's a new woman here trying to steal Xenos' attention away from her. So to demonstrate her superiority, she sits on Xenos' lap and asks him to pat her head as usual. Xenos does what Lily wants, but he's a little confused by her random request, so Carmilla comes over and tells him Lily is jealous. Xenos is startled since Carmilla just whispered in his ear while invisible, but she's just really invested in all the drama. Lily refuses to let Krishna steal Xenos' affection, so she dotes on him even more than usual to assert dominance. But Krishna doesn't seem to care at all and is still busy blowing on her tea. Eventually, Lily falls asleep, so Xenos tucks her into bed and goes back into the living room to continue his discussion with Krishna. He explains the whole story about how he rescued Lily from slave traders, and it seems those slave traders were part of an illegal trafficking ring that operates around here. That explains why Lily was so trigger-happy earlier, but unfortunately, Xenos doesn't have any information about the traffickers. On another note, Krishna has a question she would like to ask, since it's clear that Xenos must be a master mage who has perfected his defense magic. Krishna wants to know if it would be possible to regenerate an entire arm if someone put an equal amount of training into healing magic. Xenos is about to ask if it's really a big deal for a healer to regenerate an arm, but before he could finish his sentence, Krishna says it should be impossible. The only people who would have that kind of power would be saints or the highest level of healers. Xenos asks why she's bringing this up, so Krishna explains that she recently got into a fight with Zofia, and she recalls doing a lot of damage to Zofia's arm. Yet when she saw Zofia yesterday, her arm was back to normal. She believes there must be a healer in the slums who is capable of regenerating an arm, and if that's true, then it would make sense for that person to hold a considerable amount of influence over the faction leaders. Krishna plans to resume her investigation in the morning to look for any clues to lead her to this evil healer, but Xenos has no idea why she believes a healer would be evil. In fact, Krishna seems to have a negative outlook on the entire slum, so he asks her if there's a particular reason for that. Krishna admits that she may be biased, but that's because someone from the slums killed her mother. Krishna's mother was a kind person and truly wanted to help as many people as she could. She would often go to the slums and organize events to feed the people in the slums who couldn't afford to buy food, but one day she just didn't come back. According to the witnesses, Krishna's mother was attacked and killed in order to steal her wedding ring, and she was devastated when she found out. Her mother had saved so many people from dying from hunger, yet no one was there to save her when she needed help. That's why Krishna decided that she would join the Knight's Order and become an invincible hero capable of delivering justice to the criminals in the slums. The next day, Krishna heads out to resume her investigation, so Xenos can start treating his patients again. Zofia comes in with a small wound on her arm, and she would like Xenos to take a look at it. Xenos starts healing her, but he warns Zofia to be a little more careful since they never know when Krishna is going to show up. And speaking of Krishna, she comes in to ask for directions since she got lost on her way out. As soon as Krishna spots Zofia, she pulls out her guns and Zofia pulls out her knives in retaliation. The two have a minor standoff. Krishna asks Zofia if there really is an evil healer gathering criminals to threaten innocent people. Zofia doesn't deny that there's a healer, but he definitely isn't evil. Zofia is a thief, so she isn't exactly a law-abiding citizen, but she knows for a fact that people are doing far worse among the nobility. For instance, Zofia heard that Krishna is investigating the trafficking ring, and after doing a little digging, Zofia found out that the person behind the whole thing is an aristocrat. Krishna doesn't believe her at first since the trafficking ring is centered in the slums, but that's just a clever trick used to distract the Knight's Order from finding the real culprit. Krishna is still skeptical, but she asks Zofia to tell her who is behind the kidnappings, so Zofia explains that it is a man named Kalendor. Krishna finds that hard to believe since Kalendor is a philanthropist who takes great pride in educating orphans, so he could never sell children into slavery. Zofia never expected Krishna to believe her since in her eyes, all people from the slums are nothing but criminals, but the mediator never treated them like that. He treats everyone equally and is always willing to offer a second chance. Nothing like Krishna and her foolish sense of justice. Krishna is enraged that Zofia would insult her sense of justice, so she's about to shoot, but Xenos steps in front of her and tells Krishna to put the gun down. Krishna tries to get Xenos to move, but he says he can't do that because Zofia is his patient and he can't let her get hurt. He apologizes for not mentioning this earlier, but he admits that he is mediator that Krishna has been looking for. Krishna thinks Xenos is lying to cover for Zofia since there's no way he could be the healing mediator. After all, he is already a master of defensive magic, so he can't also be a master of healing. Xenos wouldn't exactly call himself a master, but he is sure that he is skilled in both healing and defense magic since both just require him to amplify a body's natural functions. None of this makes any sense to Krishna, but she still doesn't believe that Xenos is the healer. It is clear that he is siding with Zofia, but out of respect for the hospitality he showed her yesterday, Krishna decides to leave without a fight. As she walks out, Lily notices that Krishna is walking in the direction of the district where all the aristocrats live, and Xenos suddenly realizes where she must be heading. Krishna took what Zofia said about Kalendor seriously, so she went to his mansion to have a little chat with him. She obviously can't tell him that she thinks he is responsible for the child trafficking ring, so she makes up an excuse for her visit. She tells him that she heard about a recent rise in theft around this area, and Kalendor admits that he has been having some trouble with the Lizardmen gang lately, so Krishna says she is planning on increasing security patrols around here. But before that, she wanted to inspect Kalendor's manor to get a feel for what his personal security is like. Kalendor understands why she would want to inspect his security measures, so he offers to give her a tour of his manor. Krishna is then led around the entire building, and after the tour is over, Kalendor asks her what she thinks about his security. Krishna commends him for his great attention to detail when securing his mansion, but she notices something strange during the tour. She asks Kalendor if she can use the restroom before leaving, and he has no issues with that, so Krishna leaves his office. Kalendor is a high-ranking aristocrat, so it isn't strange for him to have a high level of security, but it's odd that he's putting so much effort into securing the backyard. She realizes there might be something there, so she takes a look over the wall and spots a secret entrance. She heads down the tunnel, and to her horror, she finds out that Zofia was right. Kalendor really is the one behind all the kidnappings, but before Krishna could do anything to help the children, Kalendor shows up behind her and uses the guns she left upstairs to blast her arm off. He finds it funny that he was able to get rid of a knight so easily and tells her she shouldn't have come snooping around here. Now all he needs to do is finish her off so he can continue his trafficking operation, but before he could do anything, Zofia and Xenos show up. Xenos was worried that Krishna would get hurt when he realized where she was going, so he asked Zofia to show him the way here. Kalendor refuses to let any witnesses survive, so he sets Krishna's gun to the lethal setting and shoots Xenos in the face. However, to his utter shock, Xenos is still in one piece after getting hit, although the lethal blasts kinda hurt. Kalendor panics and tries to run away, but he accidentally drops the gun, so Xenos picks it up. Kalendor starts begging for mercy, and lucky for him, Xenos has a no-kill rule, but he doesn't have a rule against inflicting pain and suffering, so he sets the gun to non-lethal and blasts Kalendor in the head. He then goes to check on Krishna, but she tells him it's too late for her. Her arm is gone and a big chunk of her stomach is missing, so she has already accepted her fate. But Xenos tells her she'll be fine, although he's going to charge her a lot for this, so she should expect a large bill. A few minutes later, Krishna is back to normal, and she is amazed that Xenos was able to heal such severe wounds instantly. She realizes he must have been telling the truth when he said he was the mediator, but now she has no interest in arresting him because she believes he is a true hero. However, Xenos doesn't think of himself as a hero in this situation. He is just a healer who made sure no one died. If anyone was a hero here, it would be Krishna because she was the first one to take action for the sake of these children. She may be misguided at times, but at the end of the day, she's a kind person who sincerely wants to make the world a better place. Zafia and the Lizardmen help them get the children out of the dungeon, but the Royal Knights are going to be here soon and Xenos doesn't want to deal with them, so he and the others start leaving. However, before he goes, Krishna catches up to him and asks why he chose to save her even though she was his enemy at the time. Xenos turns to her and says he just wanted to make sure she pays her bill. She still owes him some money for spending the night in his clinic, and he expects a full payment, including the cost of his healing by the end of the week. Since Xenos won't have to worry about Krishna anymore, things go back to normal for him and Lily. But Xenos' life hasn't always been so good. Back when he was a kid, he was a penniless orphan in the slums, and he had nothing going for him. So he just spent all of his time sitting in an alley. One day, Aston was walking through the slums trying to decide which child he wants to kidnap, but so far he is disappointed because none of them look like they'd make good meat shields. Just then, he spots Xenos and he decides to take him, so he walks over and starts talking to him. Basically, he tells Xenos, "You're poor, unemployed, and starving, so come with me on an adventure." He says all this in a polite tone laced with fake kindness, so Xenos mistakenly believed he was a good person. However, he was hesitant to accept the offer because people from the slums usually aren't allowed to become adventurers. But Aston tells him that as long as he has the skills for it, he can do anything. He asks Xenos if there's anything he can do, so Xenos tells him he knows a bit of healing magic, but Aston doesn't believe him at all because learning healing magic requires years of studying in the Royal Academy, so there's no way a random orphan managed to figure it out on his own. But regardless of whether Xenos can use healing magic or not, Aston just wants to use him as a distraction in case things go wrong. So when Xenos agrees to go with him, he takes him out into the woods. There, the two of them face off against a wolf monster, and as Aston fights it, he gets wounded a little, so Xenos uses his magic to kill him. Aston then charges at the wolf, so Xenos uses his healing magic again to boost Aston's speed, and thanks to the boost, Aston is able to slice the wolf's head off in one swing. However, he somehow failed to realize that his wounds healed mid-battle, or that he randomly became faster at one point, so he thinks Xenos is absolutely useless. After a couple years of this, Aston eventually kicks Xenos out of his party, and we know what Xenos has been up to since then, but Aston's party hasn't been doing as well. After Aston kicks Xenos out, he and the rest of the party headed into a cave for their next mission. This one is really important because they plan to use it to gain favor with the powerful nobles of the kingdom, but they all hate how much work it is. Yuma tells them that the sooner they get the job done, the sooner they can get back to the inn and continue drinking. Andres is excited since women always fawn over them once they mention that they are members of the Golden Phoenix Party. After all, their party is famous for completing missions and slaying magical beasts without suffering any injuries. Just then, they run into the monsters that they are here to slay, so Aston draws his sword and gets ready to attack. He tells Guile to cast some defensive magic on him as he charges forward, and Guile does exactly that, but while Aston is fighting the wolves, his arm still gets burnt. Meanwhile, Yuma is getting mauled by one of the wolves in the back, so he's not going to be much help. Aston yells for Andres to hurry up and cast some attack magic, but it takes him 4 to 5 business days to finish casting the spell, so he gets hit with a fireball mid-incantation. Aston is shocked and wonders if his team has always been so useless, but it's clear that they aren't going to win this fight, so he orders everyone to retreat immediately. Once they are outside, Aston asks his teammates why they are struggling against monsters that are B rank at best, but Andres tells him he didn't do much against the wolves either. Guile asks Aston if it's possible that Xenos was telling the truth when he said he was healing them, but Aston doesn't think that's possible since there's no way a low-class peasant like him could ever use healing magic. But just to be safe, Aston thinks it might be a good idea for them to hire a healer for their party. A few days later, they return to the cave after hiring a healer. Her name is Ulma, but she warns Aston that she's not suited for healing on the battlefield. She usually only heals in the capital, but she just happened to have an adventurer license, so she agreed to come with them. However, she wonders why Golden Phoenix would even need a healer since they are famous for completing missions with no injuries, but Aston doesn't want to explain what happened, so he tells her to mind her business. Guile asks Ulma if Yuma is going to be alright since he was mauled pretty badly by the wolves last time. Ulma was the one who treated him, so she is sure he will survive, but with how severe his injuries were, there's no way he will ever return to adventuring again. You'd think Aston would show a little compassion for a teammate who was permanently disabled, but he just moves on and says Yuma wasn't worth keeping around anyway. And in case you are wondering why this mission is so important, a lord says he wants to make a scarf out of one of the fire foxes as a gift for his daughter. And if it will get Aston in the good graces of Lord Fennel, he is willing to risk his life for that scarf. However, not even 2 seconds later, his plan starts falling apart because the wolves launch a surprise attack. Aston immediately starts fighting back and asks Guile to cast his defensive magic on everyone, but as Aston charges forward, he fails to land even a single hit on one of the wolves. The wolves then shoot 4 fireballs at him, and Aston is able to block 3 of them, but the final blast hits Andres in the gut, and he's down for the count. Aston keeps trying to hit the wolves to no avail, but then Ulma yells that they need to retreat because Andres is in critical condition. Aston can't believe everything is falling apart yet again, so once they get outside, he yells at Guile and asks why he didn't use defense magic to protect Andres. However, Ulma tells him that Guile's defense magic was effective. In fact, without it, Andres would have died on the spot from a blast like that. Aston asks her to just hurry up and heal Andres already, but Ulma tells him that's not possible. Only elite healers or saints have the power to heal injuries like this without special preparation, so unless they get Andres to a hospital soon, he's going to die. Later on, Aston meets with the servant of Lord Fennel, and the servant tells him that Lord Fennel is greatly disappointed in him. Aston pleads for his second chance because he is sure he can get the fur for the scarf if he tries one more time, but Fennel's daughter's birthday has already passed, so there's no point. And the reason Lord Fennel is so disappointed isn't because Golden Phoenix failed to complete the quest, it's because Aston kept assuring him that he would get it done. If Aston had simply told Lord Fennel that the mission was impossible to complete for whatever reason, he would have accepted it and arranged for a different present for his daughter, but that's not what happened, is it? For a second, Aston tries to put all the blame for this whole mess on Xenos, but then he remembers that he never officially registered Xenos as a member of the party. So as far as anyone is concerned, Xenos was never a member of the party, and he can't be blamed for anything. Instead, he is forced to bow his head and apologize for all the trouble he caused, but he hates the fact that he is bowing to a servant like this. He promises that he will make up for it, but Lord Fennel's servant asks him how he plans to do that when half of his team members are practically dead already. Aston assures him that he plans to recruit new members to make up for the losses, and next time Lord Fennel gives them a mission, he will make sure they complete it. With that, Lord Fennel's servant leaves, but Guile asks Aston if it's really a good idea to be making promises like that. After all, they've got no leads on skilled people to recruit, and there's no way they can handle quests with just the 2 of them. Aston tells Guile he doesn't have to worry because he already has a plan. He still doesn't think Xenos is worth much, but he can't deny that the party was a lot better when he was around, so Aston plans to just bring him back. And he is convinced that Xenos will be desperate to rejoin Golden Phoenix despite all the poor treatment he got. The next day, Aston and Guile head into the slums to look for Xenos, but they have no idea where to start looking, so Aston comes up with a bright idea. He's going to hire the 3 faction leaders to help him find Xenos, and he's sure they'll do it because lowlives like them will do anything for money. A little while later, he has a lizardman lead him to Zafia and says he wants to hire her for a job. Zafia isn't really interested since this is cutting into her daily clinic visit time, but she's willing to hear out a paying client. Aston introduces himself as the leader of Golden Phoenix and tells Zofia that he is looking for a man named Xenos who came to the slums about 2 months ago. Zafia can't believe what she's hearing at first because Xenos told her all about how Aston kicked him out of Golden Phoenix, and that was already a dumb move, but she never thought Aston would be dumb enough to come looking for Xenos afterward. She tells Aston to get out of her sight because Xenos has better things to do than meet with him, and frankly, the sight of Aston disgusts her. Aston gets offended, and for a moment, he considers attacking Zofia, but then he realizes he would get his ass handed to him, so he backs off. Since Zofia refuses to help him, Aston tries going to Linga's faction for help, but as soon as she figures out who Aston is, she tells him to get lost. Aston is shocked that Linga is friends with Xenos too, and just in case he's thinking of causing a scene, Linga reminds Aston that she could kill him 3 times over before he even blinks if she wanted to. Aston then tries going to Lou for help, but just like the others, she tells him to go to hell. And if she finds out he's been harassing Xenos, she's personally going to squish his head between her thighs. Aston and Guile immediately leave Lou's cave, and Aston can't believe that all the faction leaders care about Xenos this much. He tries to convince himself that they must be talking about some other guy called Xenos, because there's no way the Xenos he knows could have that much influence here. But speaking of Xenos, Guile happens to spot him walking down the street with Lily, Lily and Xenos just finished their shopping for the day, so they were getting ready to head home when Aston suddenly calls out to Xenos. Xenos is shocked to see Aston and Guile again, but he doesn't really like looking at them, so he starts walking away. Aston stops him and yells that he came here specifically to welcome Xenos back to Golden Phoenix, but before he is even done speaking, Xenos turns him down. Aston can't believe it since he was convinced Xenos would be grateful to rejoin the party, but Xenos starts listing off all the shit Aston put him through last time, including all the poor treatment and abysmal payment. There's literally no reason for Xenos to go back to Golden Phoenix, but if Aston is that desperate, Xenos says he is willing to accompany him on a few quests if he has the time. But Xenos refuses to work for Exposure anymore, so Aston is going to have to pay him a fair amount this time. Xenos wants 50,000 for healing basic injuries and 1 million for healing critical injuries. On top of that, Aston will have to pay extra for Xenos' defensive magic and buffs. But if Aston doesn't want to pay the price, then there's nothing more to say, so Xenos starts walking away again. Aston is offended that Xenos would dare to reject him, so he draws his sword and tries to attack him, but before he could do anything, he gets blasted by Krishna. She tells Aston that it's pretty dumb to brazenly attack someone in the presence of a royal knight. She came here because she wanted to see Xenos, but since Aston just committed attempted assault, she's going to have to arrest him now. However, Aston starts running because he doesn't want to end up in jail. After that whole mess, Xenos and Lily head home for the day, and a little while later, Zofia, Linga, and Lou show up. They tell Xenos that Aston tried to hire them to find him, and although they all turned him down, Zofia is worried that he might continue coming after Xenos. If he goes to the illegal underground guild, Aston might even be able to hire an assassin to target Xenos out of spite. But then again, hiring assassins costs a lot of money, and if Aston was desperate enough to come looking for Xenos instead of hiring more party members, then he's probably broke. With that said, Zofia is still concerned because there are rumors of a man named the Guide from the Underground Guild who agrees to do jobs for free under certain conditions, so if Aston manages to convince the Guide, it could mean trouble for Xenos. A little while later, Xenos can't sleep due to all the stress from meeting Aston again, so Camilla comes down to join him for some reason since she's worried about him. While she's here, Camilla asks Xenos if it's really true that he learned how to use healing magic in the slums, so he explains that he was trying to revive a corpse, and healing magic just came naturally to him after that. Carmilla tells him that resurrection magic is forbidden, but in Xenos' defense, he had no idea it was forbidden when he first tried it. Speaking of forbidden magic, Carmilla recalls something akin to artificial life from back when she was alive. It was during the time the Demon Lord was still alive, and he often fought wars with golems brought to life by forbidden magic. Just then, Xenos hears a commotion outside, so Carmilla offers to go check it out, and to her horror, she sees a large chunk of the slums on fire as a golem goes on a rampage. This was the end of episode 5. Subscribe to not miss the next part.